Hey folks, Matt McKay here. I want to try something new this week. It's a Saturday, May 3rd, and I also been have conversations with people that are wondering why certain topics happen to resonate with developers, kind of the developer social hits. I figured I'd just go through a few Hacker News hits that I saw this week and just tell you why they're interesting to developers and maybe a little bit of what you could learn about developers from each one. The first one is Redis is open source again. And the reason why this one is interesting is for so long, Redis was a beloved open source project, and only later did a company spring up around it. I think this was a little bit different than some of the other data stores like MongoDB. MongoDB was, even though it was open source from the beginning, was known for the company behind the project. Sometimes what you see is these open source projects that later have companies attached to them often have blowback from the community as far as their authenticity. It feels a little bit like a cash grab. Redis avoided most of this until they did this dual licensing. And the dual licensing was done because hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, GCP, were hosting their own version of Redis. And Redis Labs, the company behind Redis, did not want to make that possible so that they could sell their own services. So Redis is open source again. What happened was the creator and founder, Antirez Salvatore Sanfilippo, apologies, my Americanized version of that is terrible, rejoined the company and they switched the licensing back to a more permissive license that was acceptable to the community. And again, the reason why this is actually interesting is that they were trying to undo a lot of the damage and frustration from the developer community when they did switch licenses. Unfortunately, a lot of the comments were to the effect of knowing that these things can just be changed back and forth. As a developer, I feel rug pulled. That's why this one happened to be a very popular Hacker News hit. Anything over 1,000 upvotes is really a controversial or a big topic. All right, another one, Bloom filters. Bloom filters are a probabilistic data structure in computer science. Just happens to be one of those topics that it's like not something that developers typically are exposed to as a data structure. Developers who have a computer science training like myself are well familiar with linked lists and stacks, and they're sort of like your whole bucket of traditional data structures. Bloom filters, I would put in one that is a far less commonly exposed data structure. And so it always has like a little bit of this edge to it. Now, this post in particular, I believe blew up on Hacker News because it was clear about why the author was going to use Bloom filters and then had fantastic visuals about examples and what was happening. And I just think that this type of exposition of combining a narrative of why use it and really clear visuals and explaining what's happening is that sweet spot for a developer social hit and what developers want to read. Because as a developer, I want to feel like I'm learning from something, not just empty calories when I'm going through and reading a blog post. And the fact that this obviously includes the code implementation in Golang. That's why this post did particularly well. Combining a narrative and a story and great visuals, code is why this one happened to pop this week. All right, another one was actually from 2016. And this is a classic challenge of you committed a bunch of stuff to Git, and then this is converting from tabs to spaces. You'll see these posts pop up from 10, 15 years ago with a long running project like Git that developers use daily, and a situation that still occurs today. It's evergreen content. And actually, it looks like for this post in particular, it was even 2013 that a lot of the problems happened. Again, coming back to that narrative, not just being a generic empty tutorial, but telling a great story, the why behind it, that's so important. And then really showing in detail every single step of why the developer did that. And so even though this is from 9 years ago, still a relevant story. Here's another one, strings just got faster. What works about this one? Even though a lot of developers may not code in Java anymore, many were exposed to it. And just maybe a little bit of context that's not going to be obvious on the surface with why something like this was a developer social hit is a lot of developers who are more experienced. Like when I was learning computer science and I started with C and C++, I had to implement a lot of these data structures myself. And my implementation of a linked list or a hash map or God forbid, a Bloom filter is very naive, low performance compared to someone who has studied that data structure and really iterated on the implementation over many years. And chances are my implementation would have edge case bugs and those sorts of things. When Java came out in the mid 90s, a lot of the hype was Java was supposed to be more portable. You could compile the code once and deploy across many platforms. That was fairly new in a mainstream language, but actually, I think what was more important to many developers was that all these data structures were in the standard library and you just had confidence that code had been tested by experts and it was performant code. And so whenever something like this pops up about strings getting faster in Java 25, it resonates with developers in the fact that these things can still be improved, even though this isn't that long of a post, just understanding how does it work under the covers is just really fascinating for most developers. Digging into the weeds of what may seem like a niche performance improvement, I just find this in particular fascinating because it's something that I've used for many years whenever I program in Java, and here's an improvement to this very core part of the standard library. I'll just wrap up with this one is actually a direct link to a GitHub project where GPT-2, so this is the predecessor of GPT-3, it's being implemented in different ecosystems. You'll often see this with like Doom. So Doom has been implemented on like every platform from a toaster all the way up through a supercomputer. Similarly, people are implementing GPT-2 across all these different platforms. You can actually get the code. The author did a great job with the visuals and just showing this off so that you can get it up and running on your own. These types of projects often pop because they combine something that is popular topic with a new implementation and packaging it up in a way that you can go get this up and running on my own system and learn from it. Again, a lot of it comes back to feeling like you are learning from something as opposed to just empty calories. So that's just an overview of a few things that popped recently. If this has been useful for you, there's one other resource, which is just on PlushCap, which you can see some of these things. If you go to Hacker News Hits and go to say 50 plus upvotes on plushcap.com, you can sort by submit date and just see everything that in particular about 500 developer focused companies, dev tools companies with a self-service motion, what has been popping on Hacker News for them recently. So this is actually one way in which I often follow these topics and see what developers are reading. That's it from me. Have a great weekend, everyone.